So, welcome, friends. My name is Wendy Cooler. I am the convener of a small, upstart, scrappy project under the care of Sandy Spring Friends Meeting. And that project is called the Friends Incubator for Public Ministry. We have a pretty simple mission. If a heavy lift in some ways, and that is to embrace the radical claim that Quakers have made for almost 400 years that we are all ministers in each other's lives, and that furthermore, some of us are called for some period of our lives into a ministry that takes us into the public sphere. Um, the Friends Incubator for Public Ministry is itself a public ministry in that it is calling Quakers at large into greater faithfulness in our claim that we are all ministers in each other's lives. Um, I want to introduce our panelists this evening, and they are also going to be introducing each other. The friend that I'm going to introduce is Della Stanley Green. Della is a member of the Friends Incubator Advisory Board. She is also the co-director of the Quaker Leadership Center, which is under the care of Earlham School of Religion. And Della is a absolutely beloved elder in my life. I can't tell you the number of times before we started working together on this project that I trusted Della with some of the most painful things that I experienced in my life as a public minister. And I often say I would go to Della, and Della would dust me off, pick me up from the floor, dust me off, and give me reason to hope and move forward in my call. And for that, I will always be grateful to you, Della.
Thank you, Wendy. And I'm delighted to introduce to you Mary Linda McKinney, whom I've only known for a few years, but I felt from the first time that I met her that I just had a kindred spirit. She lives in Greensboro, North Carolina, and she's involved in all kinds of interesting things, including working with young friends and young adults and I really appreciate that Mary Linda has picked up and helped us do the do the technical and organizational side of the Quaker Spiritual Directors Network, which is a fairly new, just simple organization. And what I love about Mary Linda most is that she brings both a lightheartedness and a serious and loving care for all the people that she's around and for the ministries that she's called to.
Della, and I get the pleasure of introducing Mary Kay Glazer. I've known Mary Kay, I don't know, uh, at least 10 years, I think. We first met, I think, at a Friends Couple Enrichment Leader Training. Is that where we met, Mary Kay?
I think
Oh,
we met at yearly meeting and
okay.
talked about the leadership.
Okay.
Maybe though, you might be right. I don't remember.
So we've known each other for a while, and we have several things in common. Um, we both live in North Carolina. She's in Greenville, North Carolina. I'm in Greensboro. And so we share our yearly meeting, which is North Carolina Yearly Meeting Conservative, where we apparently met. Her husband, Mark, and she have been Friends Couple Enrichment leaders. My husband, a different Mark, and I are also leaders. Um, and so we've had that in common. Um, Mary Kay has been a spiritual director for a good while and is a celebrant who officiates weddings and memorial services and ceremonies and rituals for people. Um, Help me remember the name of is it Soul?
Soul song ceremonies.
Thank you. I was going to get there eventually. Um, And Mary Kay also has helped to start a training program for spiritual directors in North Carolina. And please remind me of that name.
North Carolina Institute of Spiritual Direction Information. Yes.
So she's one of the founding people and is a teacher for
Yes.
that organization. And she's just a really neat person to be around. I enjoy her company very much. Yes, Mary and Mark, and Mary Linda and Mark, and Mary Kay and Mark. I know. And their husbands are both very tall.
And handsome.
Yes.
Well, I'm just delighted to have the three of you here as a panel. And I think that, we were talking about, what we're, what we're going into this experience understanding. And I think that we are not assuming that anyone who is here knows the first thing about spiritual direction. And indeed, I know very little about spiritual direction because I am not a spiritual director. But the incubator gets a lot of questions about spiritual direction as a vocational choice, and as a call. And I found myself referring multiple people to Mary Linda in particular to explain and give guidance and eldership on this. And so my first question is for Mary Linda. And it is, what is spiritual direction?
So for me, spiritual direction is the opportunity to sit with another person and talk about one's life, particularly through the lens of spirituality. Um, it's it's just the opportunity to focus that way, which most of us don't have in our lives. We don't have the opportunity to sit and talk about what we perceive as the spiritual. And some people have a very definite idea of what their spiritual and religious orientation is, and other people have no idea whatsoever. And so it's an opportunity to explore that, whatever it is, whatever it means. I happen to believe that spirit infuses every part of our lives, and so really nothing is off limits in spiritual direction. Um, Although if a person were to talk about, I don't know, basketball every time we got together, I might ask some questions about what they, how they understand basketball as a spiritual part of their lives. So that might be the direction part, is just like to help them become more aware of where spirit is, whatever that means to them, in whatever it is that they're bringing to our time together.
I wonder, Mary Kay, if you would answer that question any differently.
I would just add to it. I think one of the gifts of spiritual direction is that it's usually one-sided, one way. So when I'm sitting with somebody, I'm not sharing with them my spirituality. I'm there to listen and hold space and ask questions, reflect back, and I know that many people like so a spiritual friendship is more mutual, and that can be really good. My experience with spiritual friendships is that it's often uneven, and so one person then benefits more than the other. And the other thing, so that's one of the benefits of the one-wayness, is that, people who come to see me don't have to um, tend to anything except what's happening in their own lives. And And the other piece is just that it's a huge gift to be able to just receive and to be have a space um, where you're not responsible for anything except what nurtures you.
Della, do you have anything to add to that definition?
I would just I would just say that I think it's really important for people to understand that direction does not, and even though we're called spiritual directors, it does not mean that we tell you what to do at all. The Spirit, the Holy Spirit is the spiritual director. We're there to help. I think of it as being an extra set of spiritual ears and eyes for the person who comes to spiritual direction. And that's certainly how I've experienced it as a directee, um, is that it just helps sometimes to have somebody else paying really close attention along with me. And yeah, and by the way, I do want to say I noticed that there are a couple of other members of the Quaker Spiritual Directors Network here with us this evening, and that's lovely.
Allison and Lynette Davis are here with us. They're also spiritual directors.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, so I imagine that friends are interested in hearing something of your call story, how you came to be called to spiritual direction as a vocation. And I'm wondering, Mary Kay, if you might start us off with your call story.
My call story, I'm sure, is going to be the least weighty of any of us. I Back in the mid 2000s, I was in the School of the Spirits spiritual nurture program. Patty Levering, which some of you may know, was in my class, and some point in the second year, she started talking to me about you should be a spiritual director. You should go to Shalem. And as we got closer and closer to the end, this a lot of this is in hindsight. But as we got closer and closer to the end, I thought, okay, I'll apply to Shalem. I looked at no other spiritual direction programs. I just did what Patty suggested. And in hindsight, it was pretty clear to me that I did it because I was missing. I wanted that spiritual community. I wasn't ready to give up the School of the Spirit spiritual community, but that was ending. And so I wanted to extend that in a way. Um, so I did very little intentional discernment. I did some, and then obviously in the while I was in the program and in the years since, continued discernment about is this right for me? But that initial push came from Patty Levering, and I did what she said because I wanted to still be part of a spiritual community structure similar to School of the Spirit.
How about you, Della?
So I'm not sure mine is any weightier than yours, really. I kind of stumbled into it. I was working for Western Yearly Meeting at that time, which, for those who don't know, Western Yearly Meeting is actually the western part of Indiana and a little bit of eastern Illinois. It made perfect sense 160 some years ago. It no longer does. But I was working there. I was due for a short sabbatical, and I submitted a proposal, and it was rejected because they said it was too worky. And some of my friends, I had four friends from Northwest, well, two friends from Northwest Yearly Meeting, who, along with three other Quakers, had started the spiritual direction internship program at San Francisco Theological Seminary, which is a Presbyterian seminary, and Presbyterians aren't necessarily really known for spiritual direction, but they were telling me about the program and how experiential it was. Like, they're like, come and just do a year with us. Come. It's just like 3 weeks in January, and then you do some things in between, and then maybe you'll finish the program. But just come and do it. I thought, Oh, it was the last, I mean, it was the last minute, and I dashed some things together and I asked for a couple of references and sent it off and thought this isn't really going to happen, and it did. And I got there and it was so refreshing. I had been in spiritual direction myself since I was my last year at Earlham School of Religion. So I knew the value of it. And I thought, oh, this will give me some great tools for other things I'm doing. But I had zero intention of seeing directees. It's like, I don't need that. That's not my call. But as things unfolded, and particularly as my classmates, most of whom were not Quaker, some of whom were obviously, kept saying, Della, this makes so much sense. It's like, okay, I guess I'll pay attention to this. Ended up going through the entire program, graduated from it, and um, and didn't really pursue it very hard, but somehow directees found me, and that was and we had to do practicum with folks as we were going through the program. But so I have been actively working as a spiritual director most of the time since 2001. I see about 5 directees a month at this point, and none of them are Quaker. I have 2 Catholic young women. I have a retired ELCA Lutheran pastor, a young Presbyterian USA minister, and a retired librarian pastor, Presbyterian pastor's wife. So, and I love doing it. It's my favorite thing to do every month.
Mary Linda, you're obviously next.
Um, so uh, I finished the School of the Spirits on being a spiritual nurturer program. And that led me to really living a vocational Quaker life. Um, I was the clerk of my um, worship and nurture committee, and my spouse was the clerk of our meeting, and um, we were just like full on active in our monthly meeting. We hosted a Bible study and dinner in our house once a week. I was spending 1 week in a month with Quaker teenagers at retreats. Um, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say it was pretty much a 40-hour a week uh, calling, just being a Quaker and caring for my community. And um, I I was wanting to go deeper into that, um, but I didn't know what that meant or how to do that. And I knew that I didn't want to go to divinity school. I didn't want to become a Quaker minister. I knew that I was not called to preach, and theology is not my wheelhouse at all. And I have a learning disability. I'm not a good student under any circumstances. So that wasn't where I was being called. I knew that, but I didn't know where I was being called. Like if you could get like a certification in pastoral care, that's what I wanted to do. Um, and uh, we had a UCC minister who was attending our Quaker worship for a while. And he heard me talking about it one day, and he suggested spiritual direction. And I had not given that any thought, even though it was something we talked about at the School of the Spirit program. Like that had not crossed my mind. But when Daryl said that to me, I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. So I started researching it, looking into the different kinds of programs, and found the Chaplaincy Institute, which is in Berkeley, California, and it's an interfaith program. And it really spoke to my condition. So they were actually forming a cohort, and I was able to attend.
I'm going to try to repeat back some of the themes I heard from the three of you in response to both of the questions. So the questions so far were, what is spiritual direction? And can you tell me some about your call to spiritual direction as a vocation? And I was hearing that spiritual direction has some things in common with what we might think of as a therapeutic practice. Or maybe we could be mistaken, I don't know, and think that it has some things in common with therapy. There were things about it that reminded me of traditional Quaker clearness practice that often happens in the context of a committee where there is a focus person and that person speaks to their concern, and then committee members are there to ask clarifying questions to help that person see for themselves what the truth is, as opposed to telling them what the truth is. Um, and I can see, connections to other kinds of traditional pastoral care work, like chaplaincy, for instance. Um, and I'm wondering how each of you would respond about, what spiritual direction is and is not in relationship to things that might sort of be seemingly related to spiritual direction. And part two of my question is, I was hearing some things about training that you each received. I think I'm hearing about professional training that you each received in preparation to being a spiritual director. And I'm wondering if you can describe some, what educational opportunities exist for spiritual directors and what kinds of accountability and support structures might exist for you as spiritual directors who are doing this vocationally. And I think I'm going to ask Della, I'm going to pick on you this time. Della, can you take a stab at those questions?
I will do my best. I want to be really clear that spiritual direction is not therapy. We are not trained as counselors. However, that doesn't mean that some of the same topics might still not be discussed. But we're there to be focused on the spiritual. And as the four of us were talking before this session began, I know at least I, and I forget which one of the the Marys it was, um, are very clear that all of our life is of a whole, so that there's not anything that somebody would bring to spiritual direction that is not somehow connected to their spiritual lives. So that's a little bit about the therapy. What is there a similarity? Yes, you're sitting there with one person and you're talking, and the person who's the directee it's a one-way kind of thing. So those things are similar. Everything else is really not. Um, I would say as far as Clearness Committee, the same kind of approach of open-ended questions, clarifying questions, um, knowing that the wisdom is there and helping the person discover that is it's very much in that same ethos, very definitely. Um, and in fact, one of the things that at least the program I was in and a program that I have done some assisting with over the years does is provide spiritual directors with training in Quaker Clearness Committee process. And that is literally the favorite thing that I've done the last few years is getting to go teach that to novice spiritual directors of all backgrounds. And let's see, what was the third part of the question that I've lost in the stream of things?
There were many words that came out of my face. I'm curious about what kinds of accountability and or support structures exist for you.
Um, every spiritual director is encouraged to have either a supervisor, a one-on-one supervisor, or a peer supervision group. I personally have been very, very fortunate that from the time that I started my internship program through till the present, I have had the same supervisor. We've had some breaks when I took some breaks from spiritual direction, from offering spiritual direction, but I've had the same person. And it's very important to have somebody to process things with, because there are often times that things that somebody brings up in a spiritual direction session touch really close to our own experience, and it's really important to process those. Um, so that's a very important thing. I know many other people who have been in a peer support group for, or peer supervision group for years and years. And that is a very, very important thing. The other thing is, I belong to Spiritual Directors International, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is international. It is multi-faith. It is not a credentialing body, but it is a body that helps keep us just aware of things. They publish a code of ethics, which I certainly subscribe to, and so it's a very important group. As far as training programs, there are all kinds. There's so many, and I would really recommend that people just talk to people that you know who are spiritual directors or people like us, to say what are the pros and cons of different programs, what's most helpful. And it's not, I mean, anybody can call themselves a spiritual director. I think it is very important to have some training so that um, one doesn't end up mucking about in things that one should not be mucking about in, and pretending that one is a therapist, or I think it's really important. Um, but I also know some people who are excellent spiritual directors who simply have been mentored by others and are very good. And I would never say you have to go to a training program to answer that call, or to say that you're a spiritual director.
Mary Linda, do you want to take a stab at all the many questions?
I think Della covered things very well, and I can't remember what all the questions were anyway. Um, um, for myself, I am part of a peer group. It's my second peer group that I've been a part of. Um, I agree completely that it's very, very important that we have accountability in our practice. Also, the reason that Della and Mary Kay and I are here is because we formed a Quaker Spiritual Directors Network. We happened, and Emily was with us at the time. We were at a Quaker event, and um, was it Mary Kay? Were you the one that somebody came up with the idea of, oh, let's go have a meal together and talk about what it's like to be Quaker spiritual directors? And so the four of us sat and talked for a while, and it was just so nice to have that conversation and to be together, that we said, let's try to bring others together. And so we sent out notices all over social media and everywhere. And I don't know, we've got probably 50 people now on our list, something like that. And we meet every 3 or 4 months. April, Allison, and Lynette, who are also here with us, they're part of our network. We we get together to share ideas with one another, to do presentations. Mary Kay did a presentation a week or two ago about grief. Um, I'll say it was a great session. I really appreciated it. And one of the reasons it's good for us to meet regularly is because, I think Della touched on this a little bit, we have to process our own stuff, because whatever we're carrying is going to show up in spiritual direction from one of our directees. That's the way it works. And if we don't do our own work, we're not going to be as fully available to the people that want to be with us. And so our Quaker Spiritual Directors Gathering offers some of that. Um, our whoever we have, whatever kind of supervision can do some of that. Therapy is an important thing for a lot of people. So there are lots of ways that we get support and that we provide support to one another, and I'm super grateful for all of it. Um, if you'd let me share my screen, I can show folks the Quaker Spiritual Directors website. So we have a website, and if you scroll down a little bit, you'll find a list of a whole bunch of Quaker Spiritual Directors.
Mary Linda put this together.
Mhm.
It's easy to use, and you can find just a little bit of information about each person and their contact information. So it's a Google site, so it doesn't have its own dedicated URL, but if you type in Quaker Spiritual Directors, you'd be able to find it. So I don't know if I answered any of your questions, Wendy, but that's my answer.
I could say a little bit about the difference between a little bit more in addition to what's been said already, the difference between like therapy and spiritual direction. Therapy is usually focused on, like something's not working in my life and I would like help trying to get unstuck or trying to navigate it. You might bring the same thing to spiritual direction, and I see a therapist and a spiritual director, and I do talk about the same things. The focus with spiritual direction is much more open-ended, and it's more about how like how I'm navigating something, and is it in alignment with my relationship with spirit? Is it in alignment with my um, deepest wisdom and values? And that's also true for me in therapy, but with therapy, it is a little more solution focused. Um, there are other modalities that are similar. Coaching is maybe a little more similar to spiritual direction, although it may or may not have that spiritual component to it. And, religious counseling is usually like therapy, but trying to navigate it in the context of a particular theology. So those are just some very shallow, like very basic comparisons. And I did put a link to a document that has some of those comparisons if you're interested in that. And I'll just echo the accountability piece too. That's so important. And it's something that we emphasize in the spiritual direction program that I teach in. And it's a way for me, when I meet with a supervision group right now. It's a way for me to like it's already been said, but just to do some of that inner work and to see, help me to see my blind spots, help me to see how I might be responding out of my need rather than out of what the person I'm sitting with needs.
Mary Kay, can I follow up with a question? Um, I'm I really appreciate the resource that the three of you have put together so that people can find Quaker spiritual directors online. And I'm wondering if you can say some more about the process of determining an appropriate match between the spiritual director and the directee.
So with that resource, people find they make their own choice. And one of the things that, when I was in Shalem and in my training program, one of the things they said over and over again, and I still remember it, 20 years later, the locus of discernment lies with the directee. That means whether to, mostly, this isn't 100%, but mostly, like in terms of whether it's a good fit, if somebody comes to see me, it's a good fit if the directee thinks it's a good fit. And it would be pretty rare and extreme for me to end a relationship or to initiate a relationship with somebody. I think what makes a good fit will depend on, I mean, it depends, it's very individual. But I would say to start with somebody that you feel you can share your deepest stuff with, if not, not in the first session or the second session, but eventually. Like you feel like I can tell this person the thing that brings me the most shame. I can tell this person the spiritual experience I had, that if I told anybody else, they would not believe it or would not take it seriously or, whatever, like I can tell this person and this person will receive it and may not understand it, but isn't gonna shame me or laugh at me or tell me you're making it up. Um, so you want somebody that you feel like you can say all of that, and that you can also say the more, quotidian things, the more day-to-day things, and explore, like how doing chores could be a spiritual practice, or somebody also who's going to be aware of kind of a fine line between over spiritualizing things and under spiritualizing things. So there's this sweet spot where yes, all of life is spiritual, all of it's included, and I'm not gonna be saying, like if someone comes to me and starts telling me about a raw grief, my first question is not going to be, where is God in that? It might eventually come, might not ever come. Um, and the other thing is that you want somebody who's going to, even if they don't speak the same spiritual language, they understand your spiritual language, and that there's uh, a place for commonality there. So those are some of the things that I would look for. I'm sure Mary Linda and Della have ideas about that too.
I just want to add one other thing that I didn't say, and I don't think any of us said explicitly, but I, we're all expected to be in spiritual direction
That's
ourselves. I
right.
mean,
That's right.
that's just really baseline, and I can't imagine continuing to follow this call and be engaged in this ministry if I were not. So I just wanted to add that one thing. It's like, oh, we should not assume.
That's right.
Well, yeah, actually, Mary Linda, I have you in mind. So I want to ask, in addition to how you would like to respond. I'm really curious about your experiences of being in spiritual direction and how really good spiritual direction has landed with you and maybe changed you.
Um, yeah, the first spiritual director I met with, um, I chose her because she kind of specialized in dream work. And dreams are one of the ways that God communicates with me. And dreams have been very, very important in my spiritual life. And I have pretty good insight into them. And I thought, well, this will be interesting to work with somebody who also like is oriented in that way. Um, what So that was my primary thing for choosing her. But also, that was during the period where I was doing so much pastoral care for my community and so much just like full-time Quakering that I really needed someone who would just witness what I was experiencing. I I actually found, unless I was trying to unpack a dream, which sometimes I did bring dreams, um, unless I was doing that, I didn't want questions. I didn't want reflections. I just wanted her to witness me. That was so nurturing just to have an hour where I could say, this is what's happening. This is what it means to me. This is how I feel God is leading me. Um, it was it was wonderful to have that space. Eventually, she wanted to change her practice to be full on dream work, and I didn't need that from her, so I found a different spiritual director at that point. But um, I keep a lot of that in mind. Different people want different things. Some people want a lot of questions. Some people want a lot of reflection. Um, some people want to sit and worship for much of the time, and that's absolutely okay. Um, some people really just want to talk about how their week has gone, and right at the end, they say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." And here's how I think spirit was in all of that. So I try to be available to whatever folks are bringing to our time together. Um, to go back to the fit between directors and directees, I did have one person who came to me. Um, I was doing spiritual direction with their pastor, and their pastor was the one that recommended me. And that person came to me absolutely Bible in hand, demanding answers. And I that's not what I do. I am not telling you how to interpret the Bible. That is not my work. And it was a terrible fit. And after the first session, they were super frustrated. I was just like, I think you've misunderstood. And I told them I'm not the person for you. So that's the only case I've had where like it was just a terrible fit. I suspect their pastor probably sent them to me because their pastor was equally frustrated. Don't know that for a fact.
Oh my gosh. Um, with the time we have remaining, I have kind of a nuts and bolts question. And if we have time, I'd like to follow it up with just some open-ended reflection on what you have learned from your time as spiritual directors that you think that, the rest of the world really should hear. Um, so the nuts and bolts question is, do you make a living? And if not, how do you support yourselves while carrying this ministry? Oh, actually, I'll pick on you, Mary Linda.
Yeah. So I don't charge for spiritual direction. What I say to people is that I want there to be an exchange of energy, and that can be whatever they want it to be. So if they want to take the energy that they've received from me and pay it forward in some way, that's great. If they want to Venmo me $25, I can buy a book with it, and I'm glad to do that. Um, I I have no attachment to what happens beyond our time together, other than some energy is moving. That it's not just a one-sided relationship. Um, and different people interpret that in different ways. And as long as we talk about it, I'm good with it. Um, and my husband makes a good living, and he views part of his ministry as supporting me in my ministry. So I have the luxury of being fully financially supported, which I am aware of being a luxury. If he and I had not gotten married, I wouldn't be able to do this work. I would be having to make a living for myself. So, um, yeah,
Are you ready,
That's
Mary Kay? Sorry.
sure. That's similar to Mary Linda. I don't need to support myself with the work that I do, so that gives me a lot of flexibility. Because my husband also makes enough to support us, and so part of our partnership is that supports the ministry. Um, that said, I do have a range that I give people, from zero to, I don't remember what my high end is. It may be 80 or $90 or something. And if they want to know, like I also let them know that, that kind of middle area of like 45 to 60 is what is a common thing that people pay. And that's what I'm doing now. I've done different things throughout the years. I have not taken any money. I have also asked, told people what that range is and asked them to make a donation to their church or to some other organization. I have done some bartering, and I would never turn anyone away for financial reasons. And I have also, not that I've ever done it much, but I have also recently just said, if somebody doesn't pay me, like they forget or what, it seems like maybe they forgot, I don't follow up with them and ask them. I will say that my spiritual director, I pay over $100 to her, and she has a much higher range. Like I paid that over the like 120 is her low end, and she asks for that because part of her, well, one, she needs that income, but that also frees her to serve people that are often on the margins, or really unable to pay. And so that's another model.
Della, can I ask you the same question but a little twist at the end?
Sure.
Um, I'm aware that you have a, professional job. You and I talk all the time.
Yes.
Um, and I'm wondering, if you have any thoughts about, maybe the role of our religious communities in making this vocation more financially accessible. Is
Mhm.
there a role here
Hmm.
for our religious communities? I'm going to ask you the really hard question, the uncomfortable question, Della.
Well, I would love for that to be so. I really would. I really think that even after more than 20 years, 25, even more than 25 years offering spiritual direction, that most of my Quaker friends, both in my meeting and elsewhere, don't know that I do spiritual direction and would know less than you folks know right now. So I have to say that I've not spent a lot of time within my community, my primary religious community, sharing this. I have done some, um, but it would be lovely if there were. I think, and I want to put a plug for the fact that I think as Quakers, we almost have a natural inclination towards the kind of sensibilities that are needed for spiritual direction because of our listening spirituality. I mean, that's what came home to me when I was in the training program, and people kept saying, "He said, how did you sit there for 20 minutes without saying a word?" It's like, I was listening. It didn't seem remarkable to me at all. It's like, I was listening. Okay, that's what I do. You know? Um, yeah, so that's a partial answer to that. I would love for it to become more common. I also think there's a little bit within the Quaker world where it's like, "Ooh, well, we don't need that." Well, maybe we don't need it in the way that we need, water to drink or food to eat. But I think spiritual direction, particularly in this time when there's so many voices, there's so many things that compete for our attention. It's a little oasis in your life to have this. It really, truly is. So I would say that. And I would also say my experience with directees and payment is very, very similar to Mary Kay's. I have a sliding scale right now between $10 and $80. And if somebody came to me saying, "I really can't pay that," I'd be like, "That's fine." And there have been seasons where I've said, "I'm not accepting payment for a while." Or sometimes, like once a year, I just feel a sense that it's um just send funds to a nonprofit or to your meeting or church, uh or pay it forward to somebody, and I just try to be very sensitive about that. I pay my own spiritual director $50 per session. She is a sister of St. Joseph, so it actually goes to them. It is written to her and to them. And that's considered perfectly adequate, probably a little bit on the high end for their scale. But as you can see, there's a huge range of scale. And I just ask people to determine what works for them. Um, and that's partly because for a while I had expenses involved with mine because I had some space that I needed to rent and a professional Zoom account, level Zoom account, so you don't get cut off at 40 minutes. I still have that expense, but I see all my directees online at this point, which is very different from when I started. Very, very different.
Mm, thank you. I feel a lot more clarity about what spiritual direction is after talking to the three of you. Um, Before we turn the recording off, I'm wondering if, as you feel led, you might share something that you have learned or experienced through spiritual direction that you feel needs to be said in this space tonight.
I just feel like it's a transformative practice. And for me, seeing my spirit, seeing a spiritual director, I don't know that I could tell you what has been transformed in me, but it feels like an anchor point, um, and a touchstone. And what Mary Linda, I think it was, who said about the witnessing, and the ability to just bring anything or nothing, um, but to know that I'm there because I want to be faithful to what's been given to me. I want to be faithful to my values, be faithful to um, the cosmos, to all of creation, to my community. The spiritual direction is a practice that is foundational for me.
I
I
Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Della.
I actually cannot imagine continuing to do my other ministries or even being a spiritual director without spiritual direction. It is one of the anchors. It is one of the ways that I care for my spirit so that I can be available to other people in a larger way than I could be otherwise. Like I said, I started spiritual direction my last year of Earlham School of Religion, and it was primarily because I didn't have the faintest idea of what I was being called to do. Here I'd gone through, these years of seminary, and I had some idea, but I had no idea what the next step looked like at all. So it has been a very important part of just life discernment. Um, and again, just like Mary Kay said about how to be faithful and continue to steward the gifts that I've been given to share.
Now, I'll speak as a spiritual director. I feel such gratitude that God has given me this work to do. It is such a joy to be able to accompany people. I love having conversations about how the divine shows up. I love being present as people explore that, what it means to them and how they do it and what it looks like. It's just such joyful work. Even when it's really hard, it's still full of joy.
I have so much gratitude for the three of you. I'm going to turn the recording off. After I turn the recording off, I'd like to invite us into some waiting worship with each other. And from that silence, I invite you, you don't need me to break the silence first. I invite you to ask any questions you might have for our panelists, or offer any thoughts or reflections that have come up for you in this space. Thank you all.